This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The ongoing evolution of the Memphis airport tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Scott Brockman, President and CEO of the Memphis Airport Authority. Thanks for coming back.
Eric, great to be here.
So, any conversation about the airport right now? You've been in this job as CEO for, what, 9 months now?
9 months,
Nine
yes.
months, but been with the airport longer than that. It's against the backdrop of Delta and the changes of the dehubbing, as people say, of the Memphis airport. What's happened since that, good and bad? What are those changes? And we'll walk through them in more detail. But your sense of the state of the airport now, post-Delta hub.
Well, the state of the airport is actually very good right now. We are. It doesn't appear that way in numbers because it's still measured against the past, which shows the declines in the reduction of flights by Delta. We have pretty much, I think, hit bottom on those reductions. There'll be minor tweaks here or there. But for the most part, what we're doing now is building service. Oddly enough, you don't see it, but we have added, I think, 18 or 20 flights since November of 2013. So in less than a year, we've already added, I believe it's announcement of 20 new flights to the system by all the other carriers. So every other carrier that operates at Memphis International has added flights, and I think Delta's stabilized. So it's now making the turn, if you will, I believe, towards positive. We've grown in local origin and destination passengers, last fiscal year after the start, the final 7 months, by 70,000 local travelers.
Which is
fabulous.
And that's the thing that throws people off because, you walk through the airport now, there are far less people. You look at the board of arrivals and departures, far less. And so people think the airport, is in decline and so on. But then you say we've added 20, the Memphis airport has added 20 flights. Those are, again, it's part of this changing of people's perspectives, I guess, on the airport. Those 20 flights came from American U.S. Air, is that right? I mean, United Frontier has entered, exactly. Southwest, which, Correct. So those are all, and also I guess that's also a part of this dynamic of overall flight costs coming down, right?
Correct.
So,
the additional competition that has occurred with the reduction in the Delta hub, okay, no longer being a fortress, if you will, and the addition of both Frontier, Southwest, and competition from the other carriers, has brought fares down. I mean, we are out of the top 10 marginally, but we are at least out of the top 10 in airfares. And so now our next attack plan, our next goal, if you will, is to get out of the top 25. And the way to do that is to continue to press for additional low-cost carriers, additional flights that continue to bring competition to the market while growing the market at the same time.
So I remember, years ago, it was not on the show, but Arnold Pearl, the longtime head of the airport authority, the chair of the board, or president, chair of the board, and I think you were COO at that time, and it was at the beginning of, probably 2009, 2010, 2011. It's the beginning of Delta beginning to really cut back. It was mid-recession. And Arnold was in the awkward place, I don't want to put words in his mouth, of saying that, look, this is going to be painful. I don't want to badmouth our big client customer Delta, but if people want Southwest to come in, if they want lower cost flights, Delta's going to have to cut back. The two things can't coexist, in effect, is what he said. And again, I'm paraphrasing loosely. And that seems to be what's happened. That, again, with Delta reducing its footprint, that sort of sense of it being a fortress that kept most everyone else out, these other people have come in and offered, Frontier, for instance, has done sort of shocking things, Dallas flights and for $39, and the things that people thought that associated with Southwest, that Frontier's doing those also. So is that, I don't know that it was desirable on the part of the airport to lose the hub status, but if you're going to lose the hub status, do you feel like things have played out pretty well?
If you've got to lose the hub, which nobody wants to do. I mean,
Right.
Cleveland didn't want to do it. You know, I mean,
Right.
everybody that's lost a hub, none of them have wanted to, and we didn't either. We fought very hard to try to keep it, just because of the benefit it brought to the community with the number of destinations. But the reality is we are in very good position as we go forward post-hub, if you will.
I mean, some of the other cities, you mentioned Cleveland, but Cincinnati, Pittsburgh has taken, I mean, other, you know, some, again, there's a Memphis, sometimes a Memphis dynamic of people thinking we're the only ones who are losing, you know, everyone else has great service and we don't. That's not the case. A lot of cities the size of Memphis or bigger than Memphis have been really hurt by all this consolidation, right? I mean, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Cleveland, across the, and certainly small airports, but even comparably sized airports. Talk about how Memphis is doing relative to some of those other ones.
Well, we are in the fledgling state of where, let's say, a St. Louis has been, or even in Nashville. Look a little closer to home.
Yeah.
Okay, Nashville had an American hub until 1994, and American closed their hub, and it nominally took them 7 to 10 years to really build back a mesh of flights, if you will, across the system. And now they actually have, I believe, more seats in their market than they had pre-hub. So that's 20 years later.
Yeah.
So it takes time. St. Louis is the same way. St. Louis was a TWA hub. TWA was acquired by American, and American closed it. They immediately suffered the pain that Memphis is in right now: loss of flights, loss of connectivity, and a psychological blow to the city. But now they are in a growth mode with good competition, a number of carriers, and that has come through the addition of all of the other carriers, and now they are building again. And so we're in that same position. We will grow again.
I was sitting with some friends who are more, I mean, I might travel, I don't know, use the airport once a month or something like that. And they're people who travel quite a bit more for work. And it was interesting to hear them talk, and I wonder if you hear this from other people. They were talking, lamenting, you know, how few Delta flights there were compared to before. And one of them said, sort of offhand, well, you know, I find myself sometimes I have to look at other air carriers. And I said, you don't do that? And they were, no, I just go to the Delta site, delta.com, and I look and I see where I can get, and I have to fly through someplace. And I was saying, well, no, if you use a travel site, you know, I don't want to, you know, Expedia, Travelocity, or whatever, there are actually a whole lot of options, and you see the competition. And they were really, and I think of them as more savvy travelers than I am. And they were kind of struck by that. Like, well, I'm a Delta, you know, elite member, and I have Delta points, and I don't want to fly another airline. And I said, well, if you go to one of these other sites, you'll see there's actually more options than you think. And you may even fly to your destination on US Air and fly back on Southwest. I mean, you may find that there's this whole different way of traveling. Is that part of the education process, or the just evolution of travelers in Memphis and what they have to do and the choices they have to make?
You know, it is, and quite frankly, the challenge is that you, no offense, Eric, but you fell in the same trade. You said Expedia and Travelocity. Southwest Airlines does not utilize those sites,
right.
So you won't find Frontier or, excuse me, Frontier or Southwest on those sites. So what we're going to do to try to assist Memphians, Mid-Southerners, if you will, to look at all options is we're going to put a flight guide, if you will, on our website, which you click in, I want to go to Albany, New York, okay, and you do Memphis to Albany, and it will bring you every airline option and every airline schedule with one stop or two stops, whatever we choose to set the parameters at, to get there. Now you can make an informed decision as a traveler, okay, I'm going to go look at Southwest website, because you have to go directly to Southwest, you have to go directly to Frontier, or you can go to a Expedia for American, you know, United, Delta.
So in that sense, it's a hassle, I guess.
And
again, I did say it wrong, and thank you for correcting me, because when I make flights now, I end up with 3 browsers open, and I'm going back and forth, and I'm making notes on a piece of paper, and it's not as simple as it was where you'd go into delta.com or Northwest before that, because it really wasn't worth looking at the other airlines, because it was always so much easier, if maybe more expensive, to use the Delta or the Northwest. But that's part of the change. Is that part of, you all are in the middle of hiring a marketing advertising agency. Is that part of their charge, is to kind of educate travelers in Memphis on how to better utilize the Memphis airport, or is their mission something else entirely?
No, that is part of the mission. Their mission is very broad. Their mission is to assist us in moving our new branding effort forward, if you will. Okay. Capitalizing on the MEM, and we've got the MEM Park, which is the new parking program. And I am in a process of working with our tenants and our our employees on a positively memorable travel experience. That's our customer service program,
right,
highlighting the MEM and memorable. And they will work with that branding with us. They'll also look at, how should we be advertising, taking advantage of our jumbotrons, our electronic billboards?
Okay.
How do we deliver the message correctly to the travelers, that utilize Memphis International Airport? How do we move ourselves to becoming the airport of choice? And so they will assist us in delivering that message, because if we're not delivering the message properly, people may not understand it. Yeah. So as we do this relentless pursuit of frequent and affordable air service, and we continue to add flights, okay? When that 20 over the last 10 or 11 months becomes 40 new flights or 60 new flights, right, as we continue to grow, we need to be able to make sure we're hitting our mark with telling the local traveler how to access those flights.
And when you it's a couple things. You talked about the parking garage, or you talked about parking in Mempark, and the parking garage, which was built right in the middle of the recession and perfect storm, middle of the recession and the dehubbing process with Delta. And so you got a lot of the airport authority got a lot of criticism. Why are they doing this? This is the wrong time. This thing is going to be a big empty fortress, and it's going to lose money. What is the financial status of that parking garage? Is it paying for itself or playing out the way you anticipate it?
That garage is tremendously beneficial to the airport and to our financial situation. It is making money every day. It is contributing positive resources to the system, if you will. We are parking thousands of cars in there. Are we filling it up? No, but we intentionally built it extremely large for the future. There's 4,500 spaces on those 7 floors. And so we're filling, about half of it right now, which it's only been open a year and a half.
Right.
And so that is tremendously beneficial. I think what's happened is there's been a shift. People that used to get dropped off because of the cost and the hassle and whatever are now parking for $6 a day in the economy lot, taking the moving walkways into the terminal, and it's an easy, efficient process. So we're winning back customers, controlling that experience.
And the parking garage, and we've talked about it before, but it's worth repeating. It goes back to something you said early in the show, that destination and origination traffic is up by, what'd you say,
70,000.
70,000. So people didn't follow that. That is people who are flying in and out of Memphis to get in a rental car or get on a taxi or whatever and visit Memphis or have business in Memphis or whatever. That's separate, and that's always the people who would be using the garage, correct? Versus in the old days when there were however many, hundreds of thousands more passengers going through Memphis, they weren't touching the garage, and they were never going to touch the garage. Is that correct? That when we were a hub, those people don't rent cars or see Memphis; they pass through. And that's part of the evolution. Is that,
You're nailing it on the head, is that we have shifted from an airport that was dominated by transfer passengers, people that got off one plane onto another. They spent literally 45 minutes to an hour and a half in the airport, bought a barbecue sandwich, got on another plane, went on to their destination. Now our air service is geared around the local traffic, whether it's a business traveler coming in to meet with someone, renting a car and going to conduct their business, or local travelers going out. At the peak, we had 6 million in-plane passengers, people getting on a plane when we had the hub. 70% of those were transfers.
They never left the airport.
They never left the airport. Now we have roughly 2 million enplanements, and 98% of those are local.
Right.
Okay, so the evolution has totally turned. Now we are focused on delivering air service that the local community needs, delivering services and products specifically for the local community. So it's a reinvention. That's the term I always use.
Yeah.
It's a reinvention of the airport authority.
I want to continue on that, but coming back to parking for a second, some of the off-site parking places have closed, and that was, you all took flack for that, and fairly or not. Was that always something you anticipated, that those off-site private parking places would maybe not be able to stand the competition of your on-site parking, and you bought one piece of land that was
the old Park It Here facility.
Park It Here, okay.
Correct.
Your thoughts on that, on some of those outside places closing?
Well, there is a place in the customer service model for off-airport parkers. Okay, They offer a service that I cannot offer, okay?
Yeah.
They pick you up at your trunk, they have someone load your bags into their van. It takes a lot more time and it actually costs more, but there is a point, there are people that want that type of service. And so we, in no way, shape, or form was the construction of the garage meant to eliminate them.
Right.
What we built that garage for was to deliver a customer service product on the airport. We have an obligation to the travelers to provide parking spaces within the footprint of the terminal, and we were up against capacity of the existing structure. Plus, we wanted to move the rental cars onto the site, and to build that in that consolidated ground transportation center was a very efficient way to do that. So now the rental cars are on site. We've enhanced our parking options, and we still have off-airport parking lots that are doing just fine, to my knowledge. Park It Here, unfortunately, chose not to operate, and we did buy that site to use for a future rental car maintenance and storage facility. So.
Okay. You talked about the transformation of the airport, and I think when we had you on in January, you had just begun to unveil plans for a physical transformation of the terminal or terminals. Talk about what has started. I think the contract was signed for the first demolition of part, and just talk about that physical transformation and consolidation and so on in the terminal space.
Right. The terminal modernization plan has a lot of steps that have to take place before anyone will actually see a terminal per se improvement on the B concourse. We have to finish the apron projects, where the aircraft park around the terminal. We have to demolish the A and C, and that contract was what was just awarded.
Let me slow you down just a second. A and C are two terminals. So if you go in the main, what people think of as the Northwest or Delta kind of main, that's Terminal B.
Terminal, that's Concourse B. And I used the wrong term, terminal.
Concourse B.
It's Concourse B.
A and C are A and C entirely demolished or just cut
just
back?
Just pieces of it.
A
small piece of A that juts into the courtyard or juts south of the terminal complex needs to be removed to open up the B concourse.
Okay.
The south end of the C, there's about 7 gates at the south end of C that are in the way that we will remove eventually as a second phase.
Right.
That will open up the B concourse. The B concourse is really Main Street, if you will.
Right.
And we had a 1-lane bridge to Main Street.
Yeah. Okay.
So we had to fix that.
But so the demolition happens and then demolition happens. When people see the nicer, more open Concourse B will be years from now?
Actually, we hope to start on that project very late in 2015 or early 2016.
Okay. And
we haven't even hired a designer yet for the project.
Okay. But there's some consolidation of food services and so on because that's changed. You don't have the 6 million passengers passing through anymore. Right. So there's been some changes to food service and those kind of amenities?
Well, we're going to move before we actually do the modernization or during the whole process, we will relocate all of our carriers to the B concourse.
Okay.
So all of the flights will depart and originate and return to the B concourse. All of the baggage claim facilities will be consolidated into the B baggage claim. Okay. Much more open space, customer friendly. We will then mothball. We'll close the A and the C for future use, the pieces that will remain, the north half. Everyone will move to the B. Then we will start on the process of the modernization, which will be the widening of the concourse, adding the natural light, the moving walkways.
Okay.
And at that point, we will focus on evolving the new concession program in that modern B concourse.
Okay. And so B and C don't, again, not all of it gets destroyed. Because I think you caught some criticism for that. Well, you build it, then you tear it down, but you're just tearing down part of it and mothballing a bunch of space in hopes that you fill that up someday.
Yeah, we end up losing about 20 gates.
Yeah.
Okay. Total.
Out of how many gates?
Out of 83.
Okay.
But the reality is that we will have 63 gates remaining. Yeah. Those 63 gates in the new environment as an origin and destination airport will serve 300 flights a day and 6 million passengers. And that's relevant because in our heyday as a hub, we had roughly 300 flights a day and 6 million enplanements.
Yeah.
So the terminal, even with the 2 pieces removed, will still serve the same amount as we had as our maximum before.
Okay.
Under the new environment.
I mentioned taxis. We've mentioned people coming, into Memphis and so on. That brings up the whole question of Uber and Lyft, these ride-sharing services. Right now, I can't remember how it worked. I apologize. what is the status of Uber and Lyft working at the airport? Did you all ban them, or did the city ban them, or did you work in concert together? What's the status on that?
Well, it's sort of a dovetail. In order for someone as a commercial vehicle service, they have to be permitted by the city.
Okay.
Okay, that's the I believe it's city ordinance. Once they're permitted by the city, then they come to us and we sign an agreement with them. We verify they're permitted. We verify the insurance.
Yeah.
They pass our inspection to make sure their vehicles are safe, and then they're given an operating agreement with the airport. If they're not permitted by the city, they're not authorized to get a permit from us. So as long as an Uber or a Lyft refuses to be permitted by the city, then they're not permitted to operate at the airport.
Would you like the city to start permitting them?
If Uber and Lyft will meet the requirements, yes. Okay. Our issue is we want to make sure that the vehicles are safe, that there are, there are a reasonable amount of background checks and things on the company or the individuals driving, and that there is insurance to protect the passengers. That all those things are in place, and once that happens, I have no problem with anyone. Operating in a commercial environment.
Other folks, other airports have done this, I think, right? I don't think Memphis is the only one that's, this is a big controversy nationally.
System-wide across the country, airports are all struggling with this for the same reasons. It's a safety issue in making sure that things are done correctly. And airports are struggling with this across the country. Some locations have banned their services.
Yeah.
Okay. And we haven't taken that step. We're allowing them to try to work through it with the city in the permitting process.
Okay.
And we've been in discussion with them from a standpoint of our general counsel to their general counsel.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Let's shift gears. The other huge tenant at the by the way, at the airport is of course FedEx. A massive presence, obviously. They are. Made a little news recently in this whole conversation about pilots, not the people who fly, but the tax incentive program. That's a big debate in the city and the county, and into the healthcare benefits and so on and so forth. You all do not issue pilots or incentives of that fashion. FedEx, I'm just going to read from their executive vice president said to the city council, as we look at the modernization of the express air hubs, the availability of incentives such as pilots by local governments is an important factor to our decisions, whether it is here in Memphis, Indianapolis, Newark, Greensboro, or Oakland. Some people took that as a bit of a veiled threat that, these incentives, retention pilots need to be in place if we're going to look at modernizing here. What is your take on that? You obviously want FedEx to stay and invest further. And what's your take on the need for incentives and so on?
My team and I meet with a group of individuals at the FedEx headquarters every month, for the sole purpose of coordinating what's going on at the airport, what they're developing, what we're developing, to make sure that we're in concert so that they can continue to grow. We spend a lot of effort looking out into a 15 to 20 to 30-year vision of what we need to do to protect their ability to grow. They started in 1973. The initial facilities that they operated in are now 40 plus years old.
Yeah.
So they have a process that they are going through where they need to spend considerable money, to reconstruct new facilities or to construct new facilities to operate in. I don't really have a position on the pilot issues other than I want FedEx to stay in Memphis. I want the 40,000 plus jobs. I want the $22 billion of economic impact that comes off of the Memphis airport from cargo to remain here in town. And however that needs to happen is how I want it to happen. Okay, quite frankly, they are 90+% of the landing fees that we collect at the airport, which are a large part of how we pay for our operations. And we don't get any tax dollars to operate the airport.
We'll walk through that for a second. So those landing fees from FedEx for the airport authority total about how much a year?
About $20 million.
And I think you've said before, maybe your predecessor said before, to some degree, the word isn't, subsidy is a loaded word, but it subsidizes other things that happens at the airport. Is that right? The Memphis the fees on the passenger side and some of the things you can do on the passenger side are certainly helped by all that money that comes in from FedEx. Is that fair? Or are they really separate?
Well, from a cost accounting standpoint, they're separate, but the benefit is there. It is true. FedEx is paying 90% of the landing fees, which means that the fees are, with their volume, the fees are much lower than they would be otherwise.
Yeah.
So the passenger carriers are paying a much lower landing fee because of FedEx, which means that they then have much better profitability, can add more flights, can do more things, And so, in a indirect way, they garner tremendous benefit by the FedEx operation. They also, back when we had the hub, there's still a little bit of it today, but FedEx would send things in the belly of a passenger airplane. From a standpoint of cargo, in the cargo space, which helped them from a standpoint of the revenue on their cargo. So it all is linked together. We run an aviation system, which combines passenger as well as
People
cargo.
don't know that, by the way. A friend, acquaintance who's a pilot, that there's a great deal of U.S. mail, for instance, that might be in the belly of a Delta flight or an American or U.S. air flight. Yeah, and they don't realize that's going on underneath them. When you look out 15, 20 years, are you concerned, again, putting you on the spot about FedEx, the shift to ground, the growing importance of ground, FedEx Ground, does that worry you? Their express service has taken some amount of hit through the recession. Do you see that retracting more, or is that just a function of the recession?
Well, oddly enough, there is an evolution going on where there is a shift.
20 seconds left. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My air cargo has still continued to grow. Albeit by smaller percentages. So we still are focused on the entire picture with FedEx of making sure they're healthy.
All right, I asked you a big question with 10 seconds to answer. I apologize for that. But otherwise, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.